Good evening and welcome to the first episode of the Cinema Corner. I'm your host, Alec Friedman. Today, I'll be talking about some headlines, my thoughts on some new releases, yesterday, Spider-Man Far From Home and Midsommar, and lastly, I'll be doing a segment discussing a film I find to be underrated. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy the show. In news, Harry Styles, Ansel Elgort, and Miles Teller have been chosen as finalists to play the King of Rock and Roll in the upcoming Baz Luhrmann-helmed Elvis biopic. Personally, I'd like to see it go to Teller. I think he's definitely the best actor of the three. I think Harry Styles was pretty good in Dunkirk, and Ansel Elgort has proven himself to be a pretty good and entertaining actor, but Miles Teller is just something that those two don't have. And he's done Whiplash. He's shown that he could really handle a musical role and really bring a lot to it. But with Baz Luhrmann slated to direct, I can't say I'm particularly excited or interested in this. I guess we'll see how it progresses as production moves along. I'm not a huge fan of music biopics in general. I do like some of them. I liked Rocket Man. I enjoy Walk the Line, but I guess we'll just see moving forward. But if I had to pick between the three of those, I definitely say Miles Teller would probably do the best as Elvis, but we'll wait and see. Moving on, Josh Brolin has recently said he's been trying to get into contact with Disney about what the future of Deadpool is now after the Fox-Disney merger. He says he hasn't really gotten many concrete answers, and he's not really sure what's going on. Personally, I'm a big fan of both Deadpools. I thought the first one was funnier. The second one had a lot of heart. They were both really excellent. And I just hope that they're able to continue to do what made them great under Disney. I'm not sure if Disney will be so comfortable letting them do an R-rated superhero comedy. It's very successful, so maybe they will. I hope they do. I'm a big fan of those films. I think Josh Brolin was really good as Cable in Deadpool 2, and obviously he's probably got some pull over there with the MCU guys because of Thanos. And yeah, I just hope that they continue to make the films the way they've made them and don't really limit them. I guess we'll just see what has to come from it, but this is definitely an interesting breakthrough that there's no real answer yet. It's good that Disney's taking their time with it, and I hope they do the character justice and the film's justice. Continuing with his 9th film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, coming out later this month, Quentin Tarantino has insisted once again that his 10th film will be his final film. Personally, I'm fine with that. If he feels that that's where he's at creatively, then more power to him. A lot of importance is put today, more than ever, I believe, that you just have to keep making content, especially in music, but in film too. And if he feels he's given all he can creatively and that he has other things to explore after that 10th film, I say more power to him. I really think that he's given so much to film. He's really influenced and changed the game in so many ways. And he's given us a lot of really, really excellent cinema over the last 25, 26, I think 27 years actually. And if he's ready to hang up his cape and try some new things, I'm interested in what he's doing next. I think he said that he's interested in writing film-inspired novels, working in theater, and I'm really intrigued at what that could possibly be. I am really excited for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and yeah, if number 10 is his last one, I'm really excited to watch it. Lastly, Rian Johnson's new film, A Whodunit, with an impressive cast of Chris Evans, Daniel Craig, Lakeith Stanfield, Jamie Lee Curtis, Michael Shannon, and more, dropped its first trailer the other day. To be quite honest, I'm really not sure what to make of this film just yet. It's an extremely impressive cast. The trailer didn't impress me so much. It seemed like it's going to focus on a more whimsical and sillier tone, and I'm not sure if that'll actually be the case for the film itself. You know, sometimes trailers can be misleading. I'm not the biggest Rian Johnson fan either. I don't really like Looper that much. I'm not a fan of The Last Jedi at all. However, some of his episodes of Breaking Bad, like The Fly and Ozymandias, were some of my favorites in the series, so I'm definitely interested in this film. The cast and the premise is too good to shy away from. I'll be there to see it. I'm hoping it's good. Maybe see another trailer to judge exactly where they're going with it, but it was an okay trailer, and I'm interested to see what comes next out of it. As for new releases, this last week I saw Spider-Man Far From Home, and I saw Midsommar. Yesterday is a film directed by Danny Boyle, starring Himesh Patel and Lily James, where a struggling musician wakes up from an accident to discover he's the only person who remembers the Beatles. The first time I saw this trailer, I was instantly intrigued. It's a really cool premise that I've actually thought of quite a lot over the last few years, like how music might be different, or just what it would be like if someone could just erase time and take music and just see how things have changed and how the placement of music in a different era and how the Beatles specifically have influenced music in general. Unfortunately, that wasn't really what we got with this film. It was just a premise that could have been explored, I think, much further. Basically, the whole premise was just him being a struggling musician, not very successful, and then he wakes up, he realizes he's the only person who remembers the Beatles, and he starts recording some of their songs, and he's an instant success. I think that's a little disgenuine, to be honest. I think it discredits what the Beatles were, what the time was, what's come after. I mean, just assuming that the music industry would be exactly the same is blasphemous in general. I mean, the Beatles were so influential, and to just like kind of act like music's the same thing after that is not genuine, and I didn't love that they decided to go with that. Also, I think another thing to consider is just that a modern audience in this day and age may not necessarily react to the Beatles the way a 1960s audience would. I mean, I'm personally a huge fan of the Beatles. I know a lot of people are, but if they came out today in an era where hip-hop is the most dominant genre, I'm not sure that a guy who came out making Beatles music would be selling out arenas and would be called the greatest artist of all time after releasing like 10 songs. But that really just boils down to the writing for me. There's definitely a lot of places they could have went with this one, and I just felt like it was a very surface level look, and the best thing it had going for it, honestly, was the fact that there was Beatles music in it. I was fine with the performances. I thought Himesh Patel was fine. Lily James was fine. Kate McKinnon was pretty funny. It wasn't like bad to watch. It was kind of enjoyable. There were some forced rom-com elements too in the writing, especially towards the end, that I wasn't a huge fan of. From a filmmaking perspective, it didn't really do anything incredibly interesting. Cinematography, editing, anything of the sort was pretty standard. There were some cool sequences, especially a sequence where he was kind of like rising through the charts. I thought it was kind of presented in a cool way. But overall, if you're a fan of the Beatles or just music in general, I'd say it's an enjoyable time. Don't go into it looking for some kind of deep exploration of music culture, music in general. If you're going in to see something breezy with some music that you might like and just kind of an enjoyable time, you'll probably get your money's worth out of it, but it's definitely not what it could have been, and for that, I think it's a bit of a disappointment. After that, I saw Spider-Man Far From Home, which stars Tom Holland, Jake Gyllenhaal, Samuel L. Jackson, Marissa Tomei, Jon Favreau, and Zendaya as Spider-Man goes on a class trip to Europe. This is actually the first time that in a live-action film that Spider-Man has left New York. And as always, trouble follows him. He meets a new character named Mysterio, and there are some elemental creatures for him to fight. I'm not a big MCU guy. They're very, very hit or miss for me. I liked Avengers Endgame a lot. I like some of the films. I dislike a lot of them. Most of them are pretty meh for me. I wasn't a huge Spider-Man Homecoming fan. I am a big Spider-Man fan in general, be it the character in other movies, the comic books, video games, etc. I'm not a huge fan of the way they do this Spider-Man character, though that's not technically a flaw in the film itself. It was definitely an enjoyable watch, and I definitely thought it was better than Homecoming. If you liked Homecoming, you'll love this. If you didn't like Homecoming, you probably won't love this so much, but it's enjoyable. It's fun to watch. It's definitely funnier than Homecoming. In Homecoming, I thought a lot more jokes fell flat than in this one. A lot of the jokes that they did, especially jokes that they made about things that happened in Endgame, were actually very funny. There was one sequence in the very beginning of the film that kind of poked fun at some Endgame stuff, and that was probably the funniest part of the movie, actually. Jake Gyllenhaal was fine in this. I'm a big fan of his. He's a great actor, but he's not really given much to do in this film, at least from an acting standpoint, and he's good. He brings a good energy to this character. Mysterio is definitely one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. I think he's really interesting and cool. His sequences, like his fight sequences, were really, really cool. That was definitely my favorite thing about the movie. That, and there was one particular sequence with him and Spider-Man that was like a very Mysterio-esque visual sequence towards like the end. That was really, really cool. I really liked that. I wish we could have gotten a little bit more into his character. He kind of just has like one scene where he's like saying his motivations and why he's doing the things he's doing and why he's sort of here. And it's okay, but I would have definitely liked more out of the character. My biggest flaw with this character and this movie in general, the character being Spider-Man, is just like the fundamental lack of consequence that we have for Peter and Spider-Man. Something that's like very prevalent in Spider-Man comic books, but just in film in general, especially of a film of this nature. For a high school kid to be like a superhero and his aunt knows and his best friend knows and now the girl that he likes knows, and there's really there's no real sense of like issue. And it wouldn't necessarily be a problem if the film didn't kind of present itself as it being an issue. Like, he's often taking steps to like prevent people from knowing his identity, but then anybody that the film deems important learns it and talk to him about it and are fine with it. So I'm really not sure why they do that. It just feels pretty cheap to me. It's like fake conflict. And just to continue my issues with the writing, I really can't stand the characters of Ned and May in this, especially Ned. May's not great, but Ned is just, I can't stand his character. I think the two of them are really only in this film for comic relief. They don't really do anything to drive the story forward or propel the narrative. And they're in here for comic relief, but they're really not that funny. May is like, whatever. It's weird that her character is making jokes anyway, but that's besides the point. Ned is just like annoying to me. He's not funny. He doesn't do anything to drive the story. He's really just there, and I'm not a fan of his character at all. That's probably my least favorite thing about this movie, both Spider-Man movies, actually. Other than those Mysterio sequences, much like any other MCU movie, it's not the best looking. It's kind of dull. Some of the CGI isn't the best rendered. But like I said, it's enjoyable. If you're like a big MCU guy and we're a big Homecoming person, you'll definitely like this film. I can't say it's not enjoyable. I didn't hate watching it. I wasn't bored. If you're looking for something that really like elevates itself as like a great superhero film with really well done writing and excellent and prevalent themes and good cinematography and editing, this is not that, but it's definitely an enjoyable watch. And if you're interested in Marvel continuity, obviously you got to see it. And there were two scenes after the credits. The first one was actually a kind of interesting cliffhanger, and there was one really cool, funny moment for Spider-Man fans in general. Once you see it, you know what I'm talking about. The second one was weird. It came way out of left field. I'm not sure how they'll proceed with it, but it's certainly an interesting setup for the next phase of Marvel movies. Definitely threw me for a loop. I didn't see it coming, and yeah, I guess I'm excited for what they do next. I hope that they maybe write the character a little more succinctly in the future, but it's definitely an enjoyable time, and if you're looking for something fun, some superhero action, this is exactly what you're going to want. Lastly this week, I saw Midsommar, the new film from Hereditary writer-director Ari Aster, which takes a couple and three of their friends to Sweden for the Midsommar Festival. I really loved just about everything about this film. It was excellent, really. I didn't love Hereditary that much. I thought some of the scares were a little goofy, and it didn't do all it could from premise. It started off really strong, but I felt that it kind of drove itself into a weird territory, and it just wasn't so effective for me personally. But this Midsommar really knocked it out of the park. This was easily the best cinematography in a movie I've seen so far this year. I mean, the visual storytelling here is off the charts. It's one of those films where the camera itself really feels like a character telling you what you should know, what you should feel. The cinematography here is just breathtaking. Some of these shots are absolutely gorgeous and terrifying at the same time. The way Ari Aster films this movie is tremendous, really. The camera does a great job. It sort of follows the characters in kind of a creepy way. That's one of the things about this movie. It's not like scary in a traditional, like heart-pounding, jumping out of your seat kind of scary, but it creates a real sense of uneasiness. It's very much like The Shining in that you could feel something's a little off from the beginning, and you kind of know through like visual cues and some early exposition of how it may play out. But that's not really the point. The point is that you're creeped out and a little scared the whole time, and you're not exactly sure why, because something like evil and downright scary isn't always happening, but you're always on the edge of your seat wondering like, what's coming next. And I thought one of the best things about this film was that it was 95% of it was in the daylight. That was so refreshing and cool for a horror movie to just throw its characters into daylight. You never see that. And I really felt that did a great job of adding to the uneasiness of the whole thing, to be honest with you. You never knew like what time of day it was and where you were. It could have easily been 2 p.m. or like midnight and you'd have no clue. And that sense that the characters maybe doesn't necessarily even know like what time it was and what was going on was really cool. One of my favorite sequences in the film was there was like a specific cliff sequence where some weird stuff goes down. From like a plot perspective, it was really like, it came out of nowhere and it was really crazy. But where this sequence really shined for me was the way it was presented. It was a moment where it could have been a huge impact, some loud sounds and maybe some huge gasps, but it's like handled in a really quiet and non-impactful way, but it really helps relate to the main character's sort of numbness at this point in the film. And that's one of the best things this film has going for it is the main character of Danny is excellent. Florence Pugh did a phenomenal job in this film. She was the best actor out of everybody in the film. I mean, from the first scene on, we really get a great sense of her character through some sequences with her and her sister and with her and her boyfriend, Christian, who plays, obviously, a huge part in this film as well. I actually liked all the characters. There was not a wasted character. I loved William Jackson Harper in this. He's great as Chidi in The Good Place. If you're not watching that show, you should be watching that show. I loved William Poulter, too. He's usually pretty weird and funny in movies, and he was very funny in this. Humor was a big aspect of this film, and that was very, very intentional. I believe that Ari Aster wanted us to see the weirdness of this Midsommar festival through the eyes of the character. And if you were exposed to a situation like that, you'd probably find it a little bit funny at first too, some of their traditions, and it's just weird in general. And a lot of the comedy was super effective. As far as other side characters go, there was an English couple in the film. I believe their names were Connie and Simon. They were a great mirror to Danny and Christian. And the film didn't need to like outright say why they were there, but they were definitely there as a juxtaposition to those two main characters. And they highlighted that really, really well. Everything about this film that was needed exposition, be it about characters or setting, was really delivered through the camera and the editing and the cinematography. I mean, there's hardly any verbal exposition in this film, and it's really a masterclass in show, don't tell. My biggest flaw with the film is that in the third act, it's a little self-indulgent, which I could see some people having a big problem with. It was a little weird. I don't think it was unearned, but it did go a little far in some aspects, and I felt that the really, really good character work that was being done in the first, 70% of the film took a back seat, but it was definitely an earned and effective ending, and it was really, really incredibly shot, especially the ending sequence was brilliantly filmed. This is a can't miss. If you're interested in seeing films that are made with care and passion through the camera and through the writing, you need to be seeing this. This is another A24 movie that just knocks it out of the park. It makes you feel so uneasy. It's weird, it's crazy, it's well acted, it's incredibly filmed, it's incredibly edited, and definitely easily one of my favorites of the year so far. Top 5 for sure. I highly recommend this to anybody who's a fan of film or just wants to see a good work of art for about 2 hours. Lastly on the show, I'd like to do a segment just discussing a film I find to be underrated. I plan to do this segment quite often, maybe every week, see how it goes. The film I've chosen for this episode and for this week is the best portrayal of Batman in any film. It's not Michael Keaton, it's not Ben Affleck, it's not Christian Bale, it's definitely not George Clooney, it's Kevin Conroy. I'm sure most of you know, Kevin Conroy has been Batman since 1992 now, through multiple shows, movies, video games, all of which I enjoy very much. But the best thing he's done as Batman, in my opinion, is this film, and that's Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. I'm not sure why this film is as underrated as it is. It's really excellent. It only made $6 million at the box office. Batman Returns, which came out a year before it, made about $300 million. 25,000 people or something like that, maybe even less, have it logged on Letterboxd. And even Batman Forever, which I consider to be one of the worst Batman movies, has 3 or 4 times that. Only 40,000 people on IMDb have logged it. The Dark Knight has over 2 million. I know that's deserved, but still, that 40,000 to 2 million is kind of crazy. And I'm really not sure why this film is as underrated as it is. Maybe because it's a cartoon, but it's excellent. It takes everything that you love about that classic 90s Batman show, and in about an hour and 20 minutes really just creates a great study of the character of Batman with a really great premise and a really cool villain. If you're a fan of Batman and you haven't seen this film yet, you need to get on that immediately. The writing is excellent. The way the narrative is constructed and crafted is excellently done. Right away, it incorporates the mystery element and kind of shows you the way that the criminals of Gotham sort of fear Batman, which is essential to the character. And just after that, we're taken through a series of flashbacks that are interwoven throughout the film. And they really show you how he became that character that you see in the film. The character of Andrea is really cool, and her relationship with Bruce/Batman is pretty interesting. And she's a really, really good dark mirror to Batman in this film. They follow very similar paths and have very similar motivations, but it's interesting to see where their characters start and end up and how they go along. The character of the Phantasm is pretty cool villain. I'm not 100% sure if it was a comic book character before the movie came out. I think it's not, but I definitely could be wrong about that. But the mystery of who the character was, it could have easily been several different characters, and I think the reveal is hinted at throughout if you've seen it multiple times. It's just really good. I think the usage of the Joker, while a little forced, was definitely effective, and anytime you get to hear Mark Hamill as the Joker, it's always a treat. I said the writing was great. Another thing that this film has that's just excellent is the noir aspect of it is phenomenal. The cinematography is so great. A lot of really great, like, dark and moody lighting with excellent usage of shadows. The dark noir feel is really just present throughout through its excellent writing and usage of shadows. It's a good mystery, a good femme fatale, if you want to call Andrea that. A great hero and main character. His relationship with Alfred in this is actually really good too. There's one moment in a flashback where he puts on the costume for the first time, and Alfred is noticeably scared for the first time seeing it, and it's a really great sequence. For a cartoon movie that's probably aimed towards children, and that's probably why it's underrated, but I digress. For a cartoon movie that's mostly aimed towards children, the verbal exposition is at a minimum here, which is surprising and great. Pretty much everything you need to know about the characters in the story is done through its writing and its setting, and the narrative is really, really well built. It's incredibly entertaining. The voice work is phenomenal. The cinematography is phenomenal. The writing is phenomenal. If you're a Batman fan, or really just a film fan in general, this is a must-see, and if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend watching it as soon as you can. That's it for the show this week. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say, and remember that if you don't agree with something, it's just my opinion. I hope you go and check out some of the films I recommended today. If you like what you heard, or if you didn't, and you want updates on what's next, follow me on Twitter @_Cinema Corner. Also, feel free to follow me on Letterboxd. My username is ASF5716. Thank you guys so much for listening. I'll see you next week. Good night, film lovers.